Hello, dear friends. I'd like to say some words about Parshat Shmini. And I think this is an important point in the parasha. In Parshat Shmini, we have the story of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, who bring Eish Zara, a foreign fire, a Shalot Tzivaotam, which they were not commanded. And let's see the story. The story goes that Moses and Aaron go to the Ohel Moed, the tabernacle, and then they come out and they bless the people. And it says, "Vayirak for the Shema Kol Ha'am," and the I guess kavod actually means the honor of God, the majesty of God, presented itself to the people, which is God's presence. Now, Aaron had brought already an offering on the temple, which of course was the tabernacle. It's an open sort of temple. And after Moses and Aaron blessed the people, but Hashem, a fire descended from God, but and it devoured everything, the offering which was on the altar, the Olah offering and all the parts of it. And the people saw this and they were jubilant. They started crying out in joy. Vayiplu al pnehem, and they fell on their faces. In other words, here's Moses and Aaron. They just finished establishing the tabernacle. Now they're bringing the first offering. They bless the people, and then the fire comes out of the heaven and eats the sacrifice, which shows that God was interested in a connection with the people. The people see this, they're jubilant, they fall on their faces. And then the sons of Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, it says they took their machtatot, which is sort of their pans, and they also put fire in their pans, and they brought a ktoret, which is an incense offering, which is normally brought in the second part of the tabernacle, not on the outside not on the outside altar, but in the in-between altar, the oracle, which is between the outside and the holies of holies. So they bring the incense altar. But they brought before God a foreign fire, which he did not command them. And then a fire descended from before God and devoured them, Nadav and Avihu, and they died before God. What is this all about? Now, there are a lot of questions of what was the sin of Nadav and Avihu? But the question is also, why would they do this in the first place? Bring this offering, which was not called out. Some people, I'm just saying there's so many different questions of what happened. Some people say, well, in chapter 10, verse 8, God says to Aaron that you shall not drink wine or beer, meaning alcoholic beverages, when you or your sons come into the tabernacle, meaning you're not suggesting maybe that Nadav and Avihu were intoxicated when this happened. And there are other explanations too. But the question is, why would they do this in the first place? What I find the most interesting is the interpretation of the Netziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berliner of the late 19th century. What he says is when Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, saw that their father brought an offering, and together with Moses, their uncle, he blessed the people. And then this fire came out of the heaven. They saw what the fire does, how the people respond, how they were jubilating and jumping with joy, and how they fell on their faces. They were thinking, if we had one or two more fires like this that the people could see, there wouldn't be any more Korachs, there wouldn't be any more demonstrations, no more Natan and Avirams, and all those who are challenging Moses, God's prophet. This would end everything. All the various complaints, they would understand that God is now with them. They should be secure. So they wanted to do it a second time. They brought that incense offering to hoping that the fire would descend a second time. And again, the people would go crazy and be jubilant. And they thought this was worth it, even if they had to pay with their own lives. It's according to the Netziv. The fire does descend, but it devours them. What does this mean? Let me turn for a moment to chapter 15 in Leviticus, 16. Chapter 16 in Vayikra, verse 1. We call it the Parsha of Achrei Mot. And it says, and God said to Moses, after the death of the two sons of Aaron, who came before God and died. So right away, Rashi and the Ramban say, what's going on? Now? I mean, we're two parshas away from where it actually happened. It happened in chapter 10, now in chapter 16. And now it says that God spoke to Moses after the death of the sons of Aaron. I mean, that happened before. So Rashi, of course, in general says, Ein mukdam u'muchar b'Torah, which means the Torah is not always chronological, so it could bring information later that you know came from before, like in Parshat Kitisa and Shemot. Ramban, Nachmanides, says actually no. The Torah generally is in the correct order, consecutive order. However, sometimes it makes changes, but it tells you here. It tells you now that it's this. What it's saying right now happened exactly after the death of Nadav and Avihu. So I think it's something very of interest to see what God says exactly after the death of Nadav and Avihu. God says to Moses, tell Aaron, your brother, he is not allowed, he is not allowed to go into the holies, the holy part of the tabernacle anytime he wants. He cannot go into the Holy of Holies anytime he wants, right in front of the Ark of the Covenant with the cherubims and the kaporet, the sort of like it's like a crown on top of it. Because if he does, he might die. So he shouldn't do this at any time because he could die. Because only when my anan, because sometimes my anan, which is my cloud, descends on the kaporet, so you cannot go at any time. So when can you go? If Aaron wants to come to the Holy of Holies, this is how he comes. When he brings the offering, the chatat offering, which happens on Yom Kippur, and he wears the special clothing, and he wears a special hat, and he purifies himself in water. And that's the day where he brings the two izim, the two goats. And there's a description here of the service on the Day of Atonement of Yom Kippur. That's when Aaron goes in the Holy of Holies. Abraham Ibn Ezra, in his commentary here, says, why is God now telling Moses, to tell Aaron when he's allowed into the Holy of Holies? Ibn Ezra says, because when Nadav and Avihu went to bring the incense offering on the incense altar, which is in the second part, there are three parts to the tabernacle: the outside, where you have the ramp and the altar for animals; the middle part, where you have the incense altar and the candelabra and the showbread table; and the inner part, that's the middle part, and the most inner part, the Holy of Holies, where you have the Ark of the Covenant. And they are separated by curtains. So Abraham Ibn Ezra says what this means is that Nadav and Avihu, when they took that incense offering and brought as an offering and left it in their pans, then they walked into the Holy of Holies just to make sure that God knows that it's here and he should bring out his fire. So this implies that the death penalty was because they walked into the Holy of Holies. But the interesting thing is, look how far they are going. They want to go into the Holy of Holies. They want God to do this again. This has to be done, God. We need this. This is the incense offering. I know you didn't command it, but these people need to see it. But it doesn't work that way. You know, very often when we read the Haftarah, which is the part of the prophets that we read after every portion of the Torah, the Haftarah itself is connected to some part of the Torah portion, which our sages thought was a very important part of that Torah portion to remember, to teach us something. Now let's look at Parshat Shmini, where the actual story of Nadav and Avihu happens, and look at the Haftorah from the prophets. It's taken from Samuel 2, chapter 6, verse 1. Sometimes we don't read this because we have the special Parshiot before Pesach. Sometimes it's Parshat Para, like it was last week. Sometimes it's Parshat Chodesh, and then they have their special Haftorah. So not always is this Haftorah read, but this is the official Haftorah for the Parsha of Shmini, which towards the beginning talks of the death of Nadav and Avihu. Let me read you the story, and you'll see how interesting the connection is between this story and the story of Nadav and Avihu. It says that David called. I'm going to jump a little bit. I called all the of the young men of Israel to join in the army. And then he went to the people and he went to bring the Ark of the Covenant from Baalei Yehuda to bring it where the Ark was, where God's name is upon the Ark with its cherubims. And the idea was to bring the Ark now to Jerusalem. And they put the Ark on a new agalah, a new wagon. And they brought it from the house of Avinadav, which is where it was kept in the meantime, temporarily, which was in the Giva, which is in the area of Binyamin. And there are two brothers, by the name of Uzzah and Achiel, and they were sons of this Avinadav, where the ark was kept. And they were walking, I guess, with the animals who were carrying the wagon. And so the ark was brought from the house of Avinadav in the Giva. They brought Aron Elohim, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of God, and Achiel was walking in the front. And David and all the house of Israel were dancing before God, and they had different things in kinorot and nevalim and tupim, and they had drums and they had cymbals and they had musical instruments. And they came to a spot called Goren Nachon. And at that point, Uzzah saw that the Ark of the Covenant was falling off the new wagon because the animals that were carrying it stumbled. So what Uzzah did was he went to grab it to make sure it wouldn't fall. Because what a desecration of God's name that the Ark of the Covenant should fall in front of everybody. And it says, and God was angry at Uzzah. And he smote him, meaning he killed him alashal for his negligence. And he died there with the Ark of God. This is a very interesting way it's written. He died with the Ark of God. Almost sounds like the Ark of God died with him. And David was very angry that God had done this to Uzzah. And he called that place Peretz Uzzah, meaning Peretz is sort of like where you took anger over Uzzah. And that's what it's called till this day. Now, what was the story? What's going on there? David wants to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. He brings it from this house of Avinadav, who had it there for safekeeping for a while, and now who lives in the Giva, Binyamin, south of Jerusalem. And now it's going to be brought to Jerusalem. And on the way at Goren Nachon, it turns out that the ark is the animal stumbled, the cow stumbled, the ark is about to fall off the new wagon, and Uzzah, the son of Avinadav, his brother, was in the front, Achiel, so he didn't see it. Uzzah sees this and he jumps forward to block it so it won't fall off the wagon. And he gets killed, he gets punished. Now it's true, if you're not a Levite, you're not supposed to touch the Aron, God's Ark of the Covenant, but it was falling. Now, so here we have a very similar case to Nadav and Avihu. What's the similarity? Uzzah wanted to do something which he thought would be something which would be Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name. And in the end, it became the exact opposite. God killed him and everybody figured, okay, let's just leave it here. They didn't bring it to Jerusalem in the end. So why did that happen? Now, the interesting thing is, which you have to notice, see, Uzzah thought that he was going to save the day, sanctifying God's name, by stopping the ark from falling off the wagon. But there was an original problem here, which nobody had noticed for some reason. We know from the book of Exodus, from Shmot, that the Levites carry the Ark of the Covenant. It is not put on a wagon. There is a mitzvah for the Levites to carry the Ark of the Covenant. The Midrash even says when they would carry it, they would feel like they weren't even carrying it, almost like it was carrying them. You see, the mistake was that they put the Ark of the Covenant on a wagon in the first place. It was supposed to be carried by the Levites to show that the people and the Torah go together. You're carrying the Ark of the Covenant. You might say God wanted the ark to fall so that people would realize we shouldn't have done that in the first place. We should have had the Levites carry it and then it wouldn't have fallen. So Uzzah, by preventing it, he wasn't supposed to touch it in the first point, but also by preventing it from falling, the people didn't even realize the problem, that it was their problem in the first place. This is exactly the problem when an individual wants to decide what is the sanctification of God's name without God telling. I want to quote Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote has this little blurb on the Parsha every week. He says, just as the Kabbalists say that God had to create space and as if withdraw in order to enable a world which would have free will of human beings, so too human beings sometimes have to withdraw from trying to pretend that we control spirituality. And we have to be a little bit more humble about these things. So it's nice that Nadav and Avihu in Leviticus, in Vayikra, Shmini, wanted the people to be jubilant. That's nice, but that's not the way it works in the tabernacle and in the temple. You don't decide for yourself what's supposed to be happening there. And that's not and that was a mistake of Uzzah. If you're not supposed to touch the ark, you don't touch the ark. Maybe there are other things going on. This is a problem when human beings want to decide how spirituality is. And many times over history, this has been the case. The interesting comparison, by the way, between these two names, let me just point that out for a moment. If you have here the Hebrew, if you take a look, Nadav and Avihu, try to make it in colors so you can see the interesting comparison between the two stories. Nadav and Avihu on line 1 are the sons of Aaron. The sons of Avinadav, the story with David, are Uzzah, which is one place spelled with an aleph and one place with a hey, and Achiel, his brother. In both cases, there are two brothers together, Nadav and Avihu and Uzzah and Achiel. But if you also look, Nadav and Avihu, until the hey, is exactly the letters of Avinadav, just not in the same order. Hey Vav Aleph of Nadav and Avihu, you can find in the Aleph, A, Vav, which are the last letters of Uzzah spelled with an Aleph, Uzzah spelled with a Hey, and Achiel spelled with a Vav. What's left over here in black, the names of Uzzah and Achiel are Achi, my brother. Both of them were brothers, and here both of them were brothers. And the word Az, which means a goat, which reminds us of the two goats that Aaron brings when he wants to come into the temple on the Holy of Holies, when he wants to do it right and go to the Holy of Holies in the right way. that he brings the A's, the Ezim, and since there's two times Uzzah spelled different ways, of two Ezim, you have two goats, which reminds us of the Yom Kippur story with the two goats. So it's interesting how even within the words here, one story seems to hint to the other story. So what does this mean? If the spiritual world is real, and if God is real, that means there are also ways to connect to God. There are the right ways and the wrong ways. In the Bible, there are the false prophets and the real prophets. There's the belief in the one God, and there's paganism. Paganism was basically if the Torah said that God created man, meaning mankind in her image, then idolatry is trying to create God in man's image. We want to create a spiritual world where we call the shots, where we control. And sometimes it's done because even for altruistic reasons, if we can control the shots, maybe we can help people better. But you don't control the shots. We don't even control our own lives. We don't know how long we're going to live. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You have to have a certain amount of humbleness and try to understand the world around you, because there are certain laws that control it. Just like the physical world is controlled by certain laws, so the spiritual. So if God gives us the tabernacle and the temple and says that there's special ways to act there must be a reason for it. And many of the things that we learn, that we are given in the mitzvot, are done a certain way, especially according to the Kabbalists, because they have a certain effect on ourselves and about a world around us. And sometimes we have to be a little bit humble about that, but try to be open to understand it and the meaning of it. Because over the generations, there have always been people, sometimes for very good reasons that they may have had, thought to change this, to change that, it'll be the better of mankind. And it was not necessarily always successful. Shalom, shalom to everyone. And now as we enter month of Nisan, it says, B'Nisan Yigalu, B'Nisan Atidin Ligael, just as the first redemption was in the month of Nisan with the Exodus from Egypt, so too the future redemption. Shalom, shalom.